71.1.
All right, so letters we get. We get comments, and very often you guys ask us questions. I even got an email from somebody that, well, there was an accuser, and let me just set it up. Well, I just want to put my role in perspective in this event. I said that I didn't think that this was worth bringing. I didn't feel comfortable
Could
bringing
be a
this
swamp.
up. And what happened was I mentioned to Rick that there had been some accusations, and by credible sources, and I said, Rick, we can just hope this thing goes away and ride it out. But Rick insisted that he wanted to confront the accusations head on, because he felt that transparency was critical to his new campaign for the
Town Council, Studio City.
Right, and so I did not pressure Rick into this.
Well,
By this was not blackmail. It was Rick is voluntarily stepping forward.
yeah, all right, I've been,
Can you please just say that he's the most transparent candidate? He wants to be the most transparent candidate in history.
Camille, our director, says that Rick wants to be the most transparent candidate in history.
This is just
and
about.
I would say this: he's the whitest, greenest.
Yeah.
Campaign.
Well, this is just about being a man in the world. This isn't about being a candidate. This is about. I've been all over Twitter the last week, tweeting, a few times a day about rapey Brett Kavanaugh, and without realizing that I could be accused of sexual assault. There is a guy named Perry Caravello. He's a movie star. He's the star of the film Windy City Heat. He's a comedian, and he's a rock musician, and he has two best friends, Don Barris and Walter the Mole Malinsky, who for more than 25 years have been doing nice things for Perry. And occasionally, they hire me to dance for Perry at, like a birthday celebration or an anniversary of their friendship. I think I've danced for Perry 3 times. And when I'm hired, sometimes with a partner, I show up at these events with my breakaway jeans, the jeans you grab and they just tear off you, and my breakaway shirt, and I dance for Perry. I dance exotically, this kind of stuff. And, I don't think of it as sexual. I think of it as wanting to do a good job as a male dancer. And so, I dance for Perry, and I get really close to him, like super close. And, sometimes, well, every time, Perry gets mad. But I'm hired to dance for Perry. And, I have to, like, Perry will punch me. I'm dancing in my sexy underwear for him, and he's hitting me. And the last time I danced for Perry, I got my arm too close to his face, and frickin' Perry bit me. Which, I don't know, I guess I could interpret as negative feedback. But I've never thought of it as sexual assault. I thought of it as, dancing for the guy. But now in this era, maybe, what I'm doing needs to be rethought. On the other hand, if you want to hire me, if you're in the LA area, my rates are super cheap. If you want the guy with the highest IQ in America to come dance for you and tear off my pants and my shirt or I can leave them on. I don't, whatever. I will dance for you and the people that you're gathering, and I'll even do square roots. I'm pretty good at calculating square roots in my head. So anyway, on to the next thing. But it's food for thought. When I'm dancing on somebody, am I actually, like doing not good?
I think the videos are pretty damning, Rick. And I don't think you'll be able to hold office or any job in the United States. Because the person that emailed me said, Lance, if you want to nail Rick with sexual harassment charges, here's your proof. It's on video. It's not he said, she said. Rick is a perpetrator. And I have to say, these videos are lurid. They're tough to watch.
It's just me dancing. It's just this stuff. It's just kind of air humping.
Yeah, and if anybody wants, I would not have your children present when you see these films.
Have you seen it?
I was able to get through a minute or two before I broke down.
Should we give them the website to?
We'll link to it like in the comments underneath, I guess.
All right.
But all right, we had another question.
Second question was some guy sounds like he's better at math than you are, but he's young and he wants to know.
He's probably more industrious at math than
He
I am.
wants to know if there's a job. He wanted to know about different jobs you could get as a math person. Did you read that? It was
Yeah, I
like
read the thing and
some kind of
mentioned,
jargon,
statistician, actuary.
actuarial. Yeah, that was.
I got to say that, like when I was growing up, actuary was the king, the prince, the queen, the tutti the tutti capo of math jobs. But I got to, and I took a lot of statistical classes, and seriously considered being an actuary. But I've never had gainful employment in math, except for doing a little bit of incidental math tutoring. And what has handicapped me is that I don't code. If you're going to do math now, in our frickin' 21st century era, you have to be a computer coder. There's no way to do statistics, which is the basis for actuarial science, without being a...
Hard as a rock.
Thanks.
Okay, go ahead.
I turned all my underwear purple by mistake, trying to dye these pants. I had extra dye left over, and I thought if I dyed my underwear like a nice rich blue, it would hide the old man pee stains. Because once you hit your 50s, everybody, that the last few, no matter how you shake and dance, those last few drops, where they go. And I thought, if I take all the old white underpants I have and dye them, the pee stains won't show up. But turns out white doesn't.
Smartest man in the world, and he still wears white underwear.
Well, no, they're all left over, and like they were bought for me.
By some naive person that
Yeah,
thought better of you.
I had like 10 pair, and I'm like,
Rick's the kind of guy that can wear white underwear and nothing bad will happen.
No, actually not. But so I thought I'd dye them like a royal, a deep blue. And it turns out underwear does not dye that easily, and so now I have like 10 pair of lavender underpants, which isn't the worst thing. I feel a little pretty when I'm wearing them, but not what I intended.
All right, so
anyway,
the guy that wants
you got to learn. You have to be a good coder to do any work in math at all these days. Or you have to have friends who are good coders. George Gamow, the guy who came up with the Big Bang Theory, couldn't really do math at all. And he was in the 50s and 60s, and he wasn't a coder, and he wasn't good at doing mathematical equations. He would have to go down the hall in the physics building in Boulder, and plus he was drinky. A lot of the times he was just a little buzzed. He'd have to ask the other physicists to do his math for him. But even so, he came up with the Big Bang Theory. So, being able to But anyway, now you really need to be a programmer. And I would guess that being an actuary, if you can get that job, still probably it probably pays great. An actuary is somebody who determines how much insurance should cost based on the rate at which people have accidents or die. Um, because if insurance is too cheap, then the insurance company goes broke if people die at too fast a clip. And it all depends on the actuary doing good math. And to become a full-on actuary, you have to pass a series of 10 tests. It's brutal.
What about he had other careers he was thinking about? Did you want to?
I don't know, but
remember
I
what
mean,
those
like,
were?
I don't know. I would also say don't overlook places where you can use math that aren't necessarily focused on math. Like, when I was, writing for a late night show, writing jokes, as the guy who knew math, there's room for an occasional joke that rests on math or an observation that rests on math. And it was helpful to have a math background when I was writing jokes.
That's not helpful to this kid.
All right. Well, I got to say, be an actuary. I think that still pays pretty well if you want to eat steak 4 times a week.
There was
and like I know the person I always wanted to be was like I don't watch Big Bang Theory, but I've seen it a few times, and the math and science they have on that show is really good. It's very convincing. And that's the job you want to have, is like a mathy consultant to a TV show or a movie where they need authentic sounding math.
all right.
So I'm no help to you. Sorry.
The second question was, the color of the sculpture. A while back, some of you that are fanatical and pay attention, we asked for people to guess what color the statue's hair and eyes were. I had done a marble, and no one got it right that I can recall. The statue has light brown, the actual woman had light brown hair and dark blue eyes. And I was actually trying to depict her after she dyed her hair blonde. So the statue actually was supposed to have blondish. When you're very good at marble carving, you can make it seem like the color of the hair on the marble is depicted correctly compared to the actual girl's hair. Okay, that's the answer to our amazing quiz question. Another person wrote in that this may get lost somewhere in the depths of the internet, but I love you, Rick. And all of you guys have really weird names like, Mr. Beef Eater and Cricket from Hell, and we don't know if you're male or female, but I think, Rick, you probably want to follow up on that one.
Well, that just slightly impinges on, I spend a lot of time reimagining my life, wishing I could travel back in time and redo or undo some of the shit I did. Like, my time on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where I got the question wrong, and then I sued them because they got the question wrong in the first place, and that was a debacle. And turns out that even lately, for the past few years, when I imagine traveling back in time to when I'm 18 or 14 or whatever, I really can't imagine doing it without the person who would become my wife as part of the picture. It's like I used to imagine, as a younger person, I'd imagine, traveling back in time and somehow becoming famous at age 16 and going to Hollywood parties with starlets and, and now when I imagine traveling back in time, I still get on the phone. I'm in Colorado because that's where I spent, my early years. But I still call Encino and I asked to talk to my future wife. So that indicates to me that, I'm reasonably happy with my wife. So I'm flattered that you love me, but apparently, I'm hanging with my wife,
All right.
even
so,
when I travel back in time.
So Rick is still attached to the old ball and chain, but if you want to tell us, maybe it's just a friendly love, a bro kind of love.
I love
that's
you too
fine,
for loving me.
All right. Another question somebody had. Oh, this deals with something I wanted to bring up. I have a bone to pick with Rick, okay? Because people say that in our last show, I lost my temper and became too aggressive. And I watched the show, and I thought it was in some ways my finest hour, but I was trying to figure out why I got so angry, and part of it is this, and I'm now going to ambush Rick. What happened was, one day Rick and I worked without being filmed. We just wanted to make some progress on the painting. And when he came over, I happened to have been listening to a video by Stephen Molyneux about IQ, race and IQ. And Rick, because Rick is an IQ guy, I played it for him. And I've listened to probably 30 videos by Stephen Molyneux. So I'm not particularly interested in the subject of race and IQ. I can think of a million other issues. And I played it for Rick, and then Rick said, "We'll play something by this Dr. Flynn." And we listened to that. So we spent about 3 hours listening to videos about IQ. And then afterwards, Rick said, or at some point the issue was, "Do you want to talk about this on camera?" And I remember distinctly telling Rick, "No, I don't, because I really don't know what to think." I mean, there are certain things we know for sure, like which country has a higher IQ. There have been many studies that I can probably remember some points about, but I don't really have an emotional attachment to the issue or any particular theory about it that you couldn't get just typing in IQ. So I did not want to discuss it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Rick,
to.
okay, I'm giving Rick the benefit of the doubt that he was not deliberately trying to betray me in some way. But then he comes in and he starts telling me that someday my, reprehensible values will be forgotten, and that part of it was my interest in race and the superiority in intelligence of some races. And it's like, what the? I didn't say anything about that. And I didn't want to even talk about it. And he brought that in to support his theory that I'm a racist Trump supporter. So then he kept saying, "No, I'm not calling you a racist." And I kept saying, "You are calling me a racist," in different ways. And so that's part of the reason I lost my temper. Now, that leads to another question that came up on a fella named, his weird YouTube moniker is Original Mind Trick. And he actually made a good point, which was kind of sort of how I'm feeling, but he's got an actual fact. He said that the Flynn effect has pushed up IQ 10% all over the world, or describes this raising, but the gap between the different nationalities and races still exists.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons that I was dimly aware of that, and I don't have anything to say about it. I don't really know. Should we go in there and send in scholars that will raise the IQs of different races, or can they never be raised? Or so there's so many things about the issue that are inconclusive.
Yeah, well, let me restate my thesis, because I didn't state it very well last week.
You go ahead.
All right.
I'm not going to interrupt Rick, even even if he meanders pointlessly for an hour and a half.
All right,
so
I'm gonna
get
start.
comfortable, guys.
All right, I'm going to start with a meander.
Can you do it in 3 minutes?
Yeah, really quick. In evolutionary history, I found out about this today. Eyes have evolved independently more than 1,000 times. Eyes are highly evolvable. In other words, every creature on the planet that has eyes didn't evolve from the same creature 300 million years ago. But instead, eyes have arisen independently hundreds and hundreds of times. Or depending on how you're keeping score, but I mean a bunch of times. And it's because eyes are helpful along every step of the way, from the simple, patch of skin that becomes light sensitive, all the way on up to, fully developed eyes with lenses and all that. And also because it's something that can be accomplished via evolution. Unlike, say, there aren't any animals that have a gas-powered internal combustion engine or can shoot laser beams, because those are things that would be hard to evolve biologically. Similarly, it looks like history has places it wants to go. For instance, another thing that seems to have evolved a number of times throughout evolutionary history are brains. Not every creature with a brain came from some proto-creature 400 million years ago, but the ability to process information in your head or some other place, wherever your frickin' brain is, once it starts arising, it tends to keep getting better and better within that evolutionary lineage, because it's super helpful and because it's evolvable. So, there's certain things that, legs, they're helpful if you're on land, and fins are helpful if you're in the water. These things just, there's a huge, niche for this stuff. Similarly, human history and the history of maybe all thinking organisms, if you were able to look at life on, other planets, it seems like once technology starts getting going, that becomes an unstoppable process. And so we can look at where the future is going, and it's going to go there regardless of what happens in individual countries. That within the next 100, 200, 300 years, information processing is going to get more and more powerful. And technology's ability to transform the world and transform us is going to get more and more powerful, to the point where the proportion, the ratio of all conscious beings to humans is going to get bigger and bigger, where we've got really no other conscious beings at a human level other than humans right now. So the ratio is 0 to 1. But 200 years from now, the ratio is probably going to be like 100 to 1 or 500 to 1. 500 conscious beings to every person who's still wearing human flesh. And this process is going to be somewhat...
Wait a minute. Explain that again. Wait. What do you mean? What? I lost you.
All right. So AIs are coming, and they're unstoppable because of market forces, because people are going to want to have more and more power over to transform the world, to do things in the world. And AI is going to be to live longer. The medical revolution. There are people right now working to entirely decode human biology. And once it's decoded, then we're going to use that understanding to help ourselves live indefinitely and to move out of our bodies. Because our bodies, anything our bodies can do, we can imagine, this is the era of superhero movies. And superheroes are basically people who can do things, there's certain specific powers, a zillion times better than a regular human in a regular body can do. And we're going to use technology to basically, if we want, give ourselves whatever superpowers are within reason in each era. And that includes, building vessels for ourselves that,
I would like a pod.
okay,
Is it possible, Rick, that the Me Too movement could maybe affect the evolutionary, because men tend to be the hunters and the gatherers?
well, all right, so,
So now they're being, okay, go on.
well, all right, so sex,
Say the question.
all right, the Me Too movement. How does the Me Too movement fit in here? So, sex is our most delicious drive. It's of all the drives, to eat, breathe, go to the bathroom, drink, the one that gives us the most pleasure is sex, because everything else is kind of, connected to not dying. A lot of our drives are associated with the relief of discomfort. When you really have to pee, it's uncomfortable and then it feels really good when you pee finally, but it doesn't feel as good as sex. Sex is the only drive that really isn't attached to our own individual well-being. It's attached to the well-being of the species. And so sex has to pay off bigger than all the other drives because it's not attached to our individual well-being. So when you have an orgasm, it's the best frickin' thing ever. But as we get more power to change our brains and our bodies, gender differences are going to become less important, and sex is going to be, if we can retune ourselves to feel extreme pleasure at whatever we want to feel extreme pleasure about. I've mentioned it before, there's a novel by Neil Stephenson where there's a cult of math geeks 100 years in the future where they've rewired their brains so that they basically have an orgasm every time they come up with a new mathematical thought. So gender differences, when you can change gender, when you can put on whatever skin you want, whether physically in the real world or in cyberspace, gender differences will become less important. Sex will become less important as we learn to rewire ourselves and give ourselves the power to find extreme pleasure in stuff other than sex. And to some small extent, sex is already less important than it was, say, during the 70s. The rate at which teens have sex is down, 30% compared to 30, 40 years ago, because there's so much awesomeness beyond. The 70s stank, except for sex. But now there's awesomeness everywhere. The food is better, TV's better, movies are better. There were no video games to speak of. Pong doesn't count. And, the Mattel football game where the little blip goes bloop, 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 now video games are fully immersive and there's a lot of stuff that is maybe almost as good as sex. So sex is less important. It's only going to keep going like that.
I don't.
Go ahead.
Have you reached a?
Yeah, that's pretty much. But the deal is that history is. The future history is coming. The future's coming, and it's going to transform everything. And how we behave in America in the next 5 years, 10 years, 30, 50 years will determine, what happens to us as a nation and how much we get to participate in this vast transformation. And if we have, I just turned on the radio driving down here. They have the person who writes questions for OkCupid, compatibility questions, whether a couple is going to get along. And she said one of the most important questions she's ever written is, do you believe in dinosaurs? Which basically is shorthand for, do you believe in science? And if we become a country that is just shitty about science, and is lazy about it, and can take or leave science, we're not going to get to participate in the future as much as some other countries, some more sciencey countries. Finland, Estonia, maybe China, maybe India. And so I want us to be tech heavy, science heavy. I want us to, embrace the future and start figuring out how we're going to address all the issues that we're going to get hit with over the next.
Does God fit into your equation?
It can, he can, she can, whatever the fuck you think of God. Yeah, I mean, because I have a view of God as not having infinite power, but I have a view of there being beings out there in the universe, and maybe as the universe itself, beings of incredible development and age and power. And that's not the omnipotent God with unlimited power, but just way more power than we have.
Did you just say you believe that there are beings out there that have a sort of godlike quality?
Yeah, I mean, there's the Arthur C. Clarke quote that says that, civilizations with sufficiently advanced technology, are indistinguishable from magic. And if out there in the universe there are civilizations that have been around for 300,000 years or 3 million years or 2.5 billion years, imagine the level of power they have to understand and manipulate the universe.
All right. I don't want to get into all the particulars of Rick's theories about the future. He's mentioned them before, and the only thing I can say is that I think young people are less interested in sex because they're more afraid of it, because there's so much feminism that is driving the genders apart. And, kids are so scared of being accused of sexual harassment, they really take that stuff seriously. There are countries in the world where feminism doesn't hold this kind of sway, and I'll bet kids are still doing it just as much as we used to, or are doing it whatever as much as they ever have. Okay, did you want to get to Kavanaugh?
Yeah, I mean, because we've been kind of dancing towards him this whole time anyway, because, I was going to talk about, you hate when I talk about checking IDs.
I know. I actually I've begun to realize that it invalidates your points so effectively that you go right ahead.
All right, so I checked IDs in bars for 25 years. And I met approximately 750,000 customers, and I caught roughly 12,000 people with either fake IDs or who'd snuck in without any kind of ID whatsoever. And I loved it because my job was I had only about 10 seconds per customer, and I could get done with most customers in 4 seconds or less. And in that 4 seconds, sometimes 10 seconds, I had to build up a pattern of fact as to whether they were telling me the truth or not about their age. And it turns out there's a guy named Paul Ekman who's the world's foremost authority on detecting lies, on being able to tell whether people are lying to you or not. And it turns out even people who are supposed to be good at that, judges, nurses, cops, usually do not much better than chance at if somebody just says one single sentence to them. Like, Steve Jobs was my uncle. Somebody good, on the basis of a single sentence like that, would only have a 50-50 chance of telling whether a statement like that is true or false. What you need are patterns of fact. And I was going to do this whole thing about patterns of fact with Christine Ford versus Brett Kavanaugh, because there's a chart at Vox.com of the number of times that Christine Ford avoided a question when she was testifying in front of the Senate committee, which is 0, and the number of times that Ford either didn't answer the question or answered a different question or was evasive in any way in front of the Senate committee or gave an answer that wasn't truthful. And it turns out like he did that like 40, more than 40 times. And so I was going to argue that, that Kavanaugh was not truthful, and we were going to have a fight about that. But it turns out that it's Sunday now, he gave his testimony on Thursday, that in the 3 days since, everybody is pretty much admitting that he did fail to tell the truth about certain things. Not major things, but he 100% didn't tell the truth about like certain little things, like what the devil's triangle means as when it shows up in his yearbook. He said it was a drinking game like quarters. Quarters is a beer drinking game where you try to bounce a quarter into a cup, forcing your opponent to drink a beer. It turns out that the devil's triangle is actually a sex thing. It's a three-way with two men and a woman, which is perfectly normal for a high school kid to talk about without having actually engaged in it. Like, there are other things, sexual practices that people talk about to be shocking or to be funny that really very few people actually do. Like the rusty trombone, I won't say what that is, but it's a sexual practice that everybody knows as a joke. Or the dirty Sanchez, again, is a joke sexual practice that's super filthy that nobody ever actually does. But Kavanaugh couldn't say, that was it's a jokey sex practice. Instead, he lied and he said it's a drinking game. And he said that about various other stuff. I don't know I don't think he talked about the FFFFF club in front of the Senate, but I think he talked about it other times. And he didn't say that was a sex thing. He said it was something else, when really it's find them, fool them, feel them or finger them, fuck them, and forget them. It's a sex thing. Did he ever actually get to do that in high school? Probably not, but it's still a sex thing. And I talked about sex in high school a lot without ever having sex because I wanted to have sex. So he told these easily disproven lies. There's a bunch of other stuff as far as judicial, and so everybody, like what seems to be happening even among the Republicans is they're saying, yeah, he told these little lies, like he said he was of drinking age, because the drinking age was 18, and it turns out the drinking age where he went to 21 when he was still 17. Again, another little lie, where he could have just said, yeah, I was a dumb kid, I did dumb stuff, whatever. I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. He didn't, he lied. And the Republicans are saying, faced with the scurrilous accusations that he's been faced with, anybody would be as angry and as distraught and maybe as lie about little things as Kavanaugh was. And then the Democrats, whom I tend to agree with, say, well, is this really indicative of good judicial demeanor, blaming the whole thing on a Democratic conspiracy? So anyway, that's enough of that. You go on, Lance.
Well, I'm really embarrassed that I even have to say this. I maintain that a person's high school record is irrelevant when they're 52, and only a brainwashed Democrat would think that. And what bothers me is that if I had asked Rick 8 months ago whether something a guy wrote in his yearbook should when he was 17 should matter when he was 52 and up for a job, Rick would have said, no, that's ridiculous, Lance. I mean,
I think it's 53.
A person gets matures 1,000 times in 1,000 ways from the age of 17 to 52, and it should be absolutely irrelevant what they say in their yearbook. But because the Democrats told Rick that he should really care about this, now he really cares about it. And
Can I
and
correct you a little bit? Where I think the more important thing is, because I did a lot of dumb stuff when I did incredibly dumb stuff. That it's not what he did back then, or it's less what he did back then, except for maybe the sexual assault, but that he lied about.
yeah, I don't even think that. I think that probably he doesn't even remember. I forgot what I wrote in my yearbook by the time I was 23. Like it would have anything. If we could bring out my yearbook and just read it, I would be probably surprised by every word. I don't remember the names of most of the people I went to high school with. I don't remember what I felt about them. I don't remember what I would have written. You could say anything. You could say, Lance, we've got your yearbook here, and you say you want to have sex with your English teacher. Now, what do you think about that? It wouldn't surprise me. You could fool me.
Yeah, but you wouldn't lie about what.
Well, I would lie unintentionally by saying, no, sex with my English teacher, no, I didn't really feel like doing that. You're probably misunderstanding.
Well, then we get into patterns of fact.
No, what we're doing is Democrats are so low, so vile, and so completely irrational in their behavior. They want this Supreme Court position so badly that they're willing to go back to when a guy was 17 and make a big fuss over it, and their brainwashed zombies are willing to follow them.
Well, do you think that?
Now I have two questions for my
Okay,
brainwashed
all right.
zombie.
Okay.
One, when there are three women that made far more credible accusations against Clinton that they were raped by him or exposed, he threw his penis out, he jumped on them and bit them, he raped one of them. And I'll bet, Rick, you don't believe any of those people, right?
No, that's not true.
You believe them all or none of them?
Well, I haven't looked at them in
Well,
detail, but it's now kind of the common opinion, I believe, among both conservatives and liberals, that that Bill Clinton was rapey,
Okay,
or
fine,
was
okay.
was not, if maybe not fully 100% a rapist, but certainly
Right.
would get women up to his
Okay,
hotel room.
all right. Just in short, yes, you sort of concede the point.
Yeah.
But the problem is this: when he was doing that, Democrats were really happy to defend him. I mean, I remember famous feminists, saying, "Well, these women are not to be believed; they're trailer trash," or words to that effect. And now, when there's a possibility of losing a Supreme Court position, all the Democrats in America are like saying, "What? A 17-year-old may possibly have groped a person? Well, we've got to believe her. We don't have any evidence, but when a woman says that, it must be true."
Well, there is evidence, but we can argue about that if you want.
All right. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is this. Okay. So my argument is that I'm really embarrassed for you, Rick, that you're willing to go back to. Oh yeah. Here's my question: how would you like it? Do you think that, okay, the next time a Democrat is president and they put up a woman or a man to be on the Supreme Court, are you going to go back to their high school to find out how they behaved?
Yeah, I mean, that's the new thing.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that, because that just shows how wrong you are. That shows that you have drank deeply from the Kool-Aid of brainwashing. No, Rick. In the United States, the tradition of all civilized countries, from the beginning of modern history, is that what you do as a teenager is not that important compared to the 20 years from 30 to 52 where you establish your career.
I don't disagree with that.
Well, then you have to fight for it. You have to say this thing that we're doing to Kavanaugh is completely fucked, and that you don't want it done to Republicans or Democrats. What you did in high school is not relevant.
I wouldn't go that
And-
far. I would say that
Unless it
certainly-
was something, unless you were a concentration camp guard or,
Yeah, well, I
or
mean-
a serial rapist murderer, but he wasn't those
I've
things.
said before, and I'll say it again. And here, let me tell a quick story.
Okay, I have another point though, and I really need to get to it.
Okay, but let come
Make
back.
it a really quick story.
No, because it can't be quick because it involves a visual aid.
Okay, I know. All right, but so what I'm saying is, I can't. Dennis Prager said something very interesting, which I thought was worth repeating. He said that in the tradition of the Western world, even if we could prove that this woman was telling the truth, there is such a thing in Christianity called repentance. Like, you get a chance to redeem yourself.
Yeah, but
And in the secular communist world that you want to create, in the socialist world, there is no redemption. If the Democrats say that something you did at 17 can never be repented of, then
we're
that's
not
it.
saying that. But like what we are saying, at least what I'm thinking, is that frickin' Kavanaugh hasn't acted repentant. He's just denied everything.
Because he didn't do it, Rick. Sorry.
Well,
And
he's lying
there's,
about.
There's also a tradition in the United States, which you fail to address, that we are not like the old world. We're not like some kind of weird despotic kingdom in the Balkans, where you're guilty until proven innocent. In the new world, in the new society that America created, you're innocent until proven guilty. And he has not been proven
Yeah,
guilty.
but he is guilty of perjuring himself in front of the Senate committee about a bunch of dumb little things.
No.
Why? Why don't the
no.
little things count? Why does mischaracterizing like 3, 4,
Because
5, 6?
if you asked me what the Devil's Triangle was, Rick, I would have zero idea.
Yeah, but he knew enough about what it was supposed to be to put it in his yearbook.
Okay, but I don't even remember the phrases we used back in the 70s.
Do you remember Bufu?
No, I don't.
All right. Well,
I mean, there are a million things from 30 years ago
but
that I don't remember.
All right, but then we get into
So,
pattern
so,
effect.
so, Rick, when you try to get someone for perjury, it's sort of like you don't ask them questions like, 40 years ago, what did you think cunnilingus was referred to as when you were hanging out at a party in the summer? You don't ask people that. When you're dealing with a question of perjury, don't interrupt me. You say things like, "Did you sleep with your brother's wife? Did you lie on your taxes? Did your son actually commit that murder?" And if you say no, that's perjury. You don't get perjury on, what was the 1970s phrase for anal sex?
No, that's not what the questions were. The phrases were already there. And what are the odds that he would mischaracterize by accident 4, 5, 6
Rick,
of those phrases?
Rick, I would mischaracterize every single one of them. Do you know there are people, every month we have this problem in my classes because I continue to forget people's names. I forget whether they paid me on time, whether they ever gave me a check. I mean, you're asking a 52-year-old man that's dealt with hundreds of court cases, written some of the leading opinions in the United States, to remember what his 17-year-old self thought about cocksucking. It's just not fair, Rick. And as a fair person, you really need to rise above yourself. Rise above your party. Be better than your party.
Well, then I guess we're going to have to talk about patterns of fact. Because I already said that you can't, from a single statement, you can't really tell whether somebody's telling the truth or not. In the case of Kavanaugh, Kavanaugh misrepresented a bunch of what he made errors of fact about a bunch of things.
This is called a perjury trap, by the way, guys. when a lawyer can't get you for an actual crime, what a Democrat lawyer will do, they did this to Flynn, General Flynn. What they do is they ask you a series of hundreds of tiny questions, and if you get any of them wrong, they got you on perjury. Now, the original crime, they have no evidence for. But they can get you by making, if you give a confused response about something irrelevant that you probably don't think very much about. So very good, Rick. You fell for it.
Let me talk about.
You'd be great.
Let me talk about catching somebody with a fake ID.
Okay, make this fast
All
because
right,
I have something
so
too.
just one thing wrong with a fake ID.
Yeah.
Like, you look at somebody and you compare their picture to their face, and maybe there's something weird with their nose. Maybe it was that's not enough to make it a fake ID. Maybe they held their head at a weird angle. You compare it with their eyebrows. Well, maybe they had their eyebrows cleaned up. Then you ask them, if you're still a little suspicious, you're like, all right, what's your zodiac sign? Well, if they don't know that, almost everybody knows whether they're a Taurus or a Gemini or a Leo. And you ask them a bunch of stuff, and those things add up. It's not any one thing, but it's a pattern of fact. And with Kavanaugh, he gave deceptive, inaccurate answers to a bunch of stuff.
A bunch of stuff? What kind of stuff, Rick? Give me a bunch of stuff.
Well, like you said, there's no, like his level of drinking, that what certain phrases mean.
Wait, Rick, does anybody remember their level of drinking?
Yeah, I do.
Actually,
I remember the first time I got super drunk. I remember I drank 6 tall boys.
Okay, Rick hardly drinks. Okay, Rick, don't interrupt me. You hardly drink. Mm-hmm. I've known some drinkers in my life. They're not necessarily alcoholics, but they drink. They don't know how much they're drinking. One of the first things they tell you is write down how much you're actually drinking. Everybody gets it wrong that drinks regularly. So he's not lying. You have to understand, the Democrats are trying to confuse you.
Even the Republicans are admitting that he lied about these
I'm
things.
willing to admit he got it wrong, but I'm not willing to admit that he's a perjurer. I'm willing to say that they asked him hundreds of stupid little questions and he got some wrong.
No,
and I think that you are an uncharitable, prejudiced person for not realizing that these things are perjury traps.
So if there were a liberal Kavanaugh who gave these same responses, you'd be okay with them on the Supreme Court, except for their political opinion.
Rick, not one fucking thing that they did in high school would I care about, unless it was rape or murder.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't even care if they stole a car.
But he's lying about what he did in high school.
I know, and that's the perjury trap that you bought. You bought this, Rick. You're hook, line, and sinker into it. You think that in the new world that you sick socialists are going to create, people are going to be brought before hearings where their behavior from teenage years is going to count against them. Pretty soon you'll be saying, why shouldn't we execute these people? After all, he was a bully in high school. Why shouldn't he lose his job? The Democrats say he should. Hey, when you were in high school, did you ever pinch a girl on the butt? Well, you know what? That's against the law. You should do 20 years in prison, right, Rick? This is what you're becoming.
That's not what I'm becoming.
No, but
you're making a slippery slope argument.
No, you're it right now. You're it right now because you're not saying you're first you start off with lots and lots of prodding. I get you to admit, maybe what someone does in high school is not that important.
But he's lying about what he did in high school.
If he lies about it, then the Democrats get it. You see, so
he's in front of a Senate committee.
Yeah,
He's sworn to tell the truth. He's a frickin' judge.
It's stupid, Rick. It's stupid. It's idiotic, and you bought it.
What kind of judge decides to lie in front of the Senate?
What kind of judge can't remember what he thought cocksucking was in 1982?
What kind of judge lies in front of the Senate?
What kind of judge?
You said you weren't going to yell. I thought you weren't going to yell.
No, because you're failing to see what's happening. You're too sophisticated to say, well, gee, You know, if the guy did it in high school, we better put him in prison. You're smart enough to know that's wrong, but you're not smart enough to put it together and say, well, if you ask a guy 100 questions about what he did in high school and he gets something wrong, well, then you can get him,
He gets
right,
a lot
Rick?
of stuff wrong.
What if he gets a lot of stuff
All
wrong,
in his
Rick?
favor.
Yeah, all in his favor. It's okay, Rick. It's okay. It doesn't matter, Rick. You've been brainwashed. You bought it. You bought it. You're there. Now, now that we know that they can count on you when they're going to have a witch hunt, and they're going to punish some guy that is being treated, when they're going to take a guy who has had an exemplary life and ruin him because of something he did in high school that someone has no proof he did, we know.
What are you going to do?
We know that the Democrats can count on you because they'll find a way to convince you to say, punish him, punish him.
What will you think if the FBI comes up with?
I don't. The FBI is completely compromised. That whole organization should just be
Now
turned
who's
over to the
brainwashed?
marshals. Because I have dossiers and sworn testimony. They fired half of the people in charge of the FBI because all of them.
So anything the FBI, if they interview
Yeah,
witnesses.
I mean, it's like when they said they're going to turn it over to the FBI, they may as well turn it over to Rod Rosenstein and Mueller and say they should turn it over to whoever Trump's worst enemy is, because that's who the FBI is right now. They're working against the president. I don't trust them with anything.
So even if they come,
And you're so naive. You think, oh, the FBI, a fine organization. There's been not a whiff of scandal with the FBI since the election. They're just sterling judgment and fine integrity, right? Even though they fired half of them, and I've got reams and reams of documents of
I
things
just
that they
think you're
did.
more brainwashed than I am.
Well, Rick, we've gone over for the past 20 episodes how the dossier, which was used by the FBI, was full of lies. And now you're telling me that I'm brainwashed because I think maybe we can't trust the FBI on issues concerning Trump?
The dossier was, I don't want to go over this again, but
Do you think 7 days is enough
What?
time to investigate?
I don't know. I mean, some people say the FBI can do really good work even in a limited amount of time. And it's not the 7 days as much as limitations imposed on the investigation. I don't know. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this. The betting market, you can bet on whether Kavanaugh will be confirmed or not.
Yeah.
And the odds that he will not be confirmed are down to 31%. So he's probably going to get on. I mean, the betting markets are usually pretty accurate.
I'm going to tell you what I think happened. Since you've been talking about fake IDs, I'm going to now say what I think really happened, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it wasn't Kavanaugh that did anything to her.
Why do you think that?
Because she's a radical Democrat that would lie and feel like a hero for doing it. I think basically...
Did you watch any of the hearings?
Yeah, I thought she was incredibly ridiculous, unbelievable. I'll tell you why. There are a couple of things. The first thing is that in the United States today, you could find 1 million women willing to lie to stop Trump. And
She passed a polygraph. Are you going to say that polygraphs are just no
the
good?
polygraph test, according to my news source, said that they only asked her a couple of questions. It took a minute or two, and she lied about that. She said it was a very lengthy process. So that's a lie for you that she said.
Where'd you read that?
The actual person that administered the polygraph test to her said that it was over in a couple minutes.
That's something we can look
which
at.
contradicts what she said. But that's not what I want. Everyone's being very careful, okay? Because other people are running for president, other people are newscasters. I'm going to tell you what I think happened. I think there are 1 million women out there that would lie to save Roe versus Wade. And it's very, very easy to come up with the lie she came up with. It's not that hard to say when you don't have to come up with a time, a location, the number of witnesses, whether you told anybody. she's how you got there, whether you got home, whether you were alone. When you don't have to come up with any supporting facts, when the only thing you have to say is, I was alone with him, he groped me, and then I got away. You can lie about that very easily.
I got to just say that
And so I think she's a dirty liar. And
you're in by far the minority.
okay, I don't care. Now the second thing
And
is wait.
at this point, they have a date now. They think it's July 1st, 1982.
Okay.
And they think they have an address, Timmy's house.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to believe that. I mean, I'm just saying right off the bat that she's okay. If you say that they think it was Timmy's house and they think it was a certain date, he had notebooks saying he wasn't around those times.
No, he was around. He was at a party on July 1st, according to his calendar.
I was at parties too back in the 70s. But this is the other thing is, if she's telling the truth, I think that this is the one thing I haven't heard anybody say. So this is actually new stuff for the internet that no one's done a show about.
Can you tell the cameras?
Okay, this is Lance's theory of what happened. Both of the guys that I think what happened was this: she was new to the adult world of sex and drinking, of playing with boys and drinking. She was only 15. She shows up at a party with 17-year-olds, and there's mixed boys and girls. And what happens was, this is my opinion, it's my theory. Two older boys saw this innocent girl and said, hey, they probably didn't even talk about it. One of them just grabbed her, they took her in a room, they closed the door, and they wanted to scare her. And there's nothing teenage boys like more than scaring teenage girls. It's the funnest thing. If you haven't done it, you should try it. This is on advice from Lance.
Maybe don't do it now in 2018.
Okay, yeah, do it. Let's have a world where it's and so what happens is this: they say they're going to scare her, and so what they do is they want her to be screaming and wrestling, and by the way, even if teenage boys don't scare a girl, they like wrestling with them. It's like now I put on a Frank Sinatra record and I bring out some sherry and I light a few candles and then I tell them I love them, and that's what I do. But when you're a teenage boy, you like wrestling with girls.
You put your hand down their pants.
Could you
like
please be
Kavanaugh
quiet?
did?
Because I'm developing something.
All right.
So what happened was this: I think they threw this girl down, and then they kept jumping on her. It was funny because the other guy that she says was with him is this guy named Judge, and he was jumping up and down on them. That's like, and so she's getting really, really scared. And then they're laughing the whole time, by the way, by her own admission. And she said Judge was jumping up and down on them. And then these two guys, each of whom were on the football team, each of whom outweighed her by 80 pounds or so, 50 pounds at least. They were 3 times her strength, and there's 2 of them. Somehow she gets free, okay? They let her go. Don't interrupt me. I'm trying to make a point here. I'm giving my theory. You can talk about fake IDs all night. I just want to finish my point, okay? Mm-hmm. So what happened was these 2 big guys scared her. They probably groped her. They were laughing the whole time. She thinks, oh no, I'm going to get raped. I've seen it in the movies. And then afterwards, they let her go. Don't interrupt me, because 2 football players that are either one of which is 3 times as strong as this girl could have raped her if they wanted to. So nobody's asked the question, how did this tiny 15-year-old girl escape from 2 football players?
She said how she did.
Yeah.
She said that Kavanaugh was on top of her the whole time once he
Yeah.
pushed her down, and drunken Mark Judge kept jumping on him. And one time, after jumping on him several times, he's drunk. His he hits Kavanaugh in such a way that Kavanaugh is knocked off of her, and she's able to squirm free at that point.
Okay, so you don't think that two football players that are used to playing football couldn't have gotten
Well,
her
they're
back?
drunk. Kavanaugh's only 5'10". He's our size.
Okay, let me tell you. He's 5'10", he's on the football team, he lifts weights 3 days a week, and the other guy's the same thing. They could have kept her in there and raped her if they wanted to, Rick. And if you don't believe that, you're lying to me. She didn't squirm free. And the other thing is this. There are a lot of unanswered questions. Why didn't she run down the stairs and say, there's rapists, there's rapists? Why didn't she tell anybody?
Why don't 97% of rape and sexual assault victims immediately tell somebody?
But because she's up at a party and her own friends are down there. Can't she tell her own friends, whoever it was that dropped her off, hey, these guys tried to rape me?
That tends to be not how people work.
No, that is how they work. Rick, Rick, her
if you
friends
look
were
at it
downstairs.
statistically,
No, fuck the statistics.
why? Because statistics show the average behavior of people in this situation.
She went downstairs and her friends that came with her were there. You don't think she's going to say, hey, two big guys tried to rape me? Well, come on, Rick.
She probably wasn't clear on what exactly happened until she had time to think about it.
No, she said, I thought they were trying to rape me. Wait, and there's one more thing that got me about her testimony that all the Democrats are confused about, but because I'm not crazy, I see. Listen to this. She gets all emotional during her testimony, okay? Rick, let me tell you something. I know people that have been gang raped 30 years ago, and they don't get that emotional. Don't interrupt me. This girl has been groped. A boy, by her own testimony, tried to take her bra off.
Her swimsuit. She was wearing a one-piece swimsuit.
She's still emotional about that. Let me tell you something. I've met in my life 5 rape victims. 5 rape victims, at least. And each one of them, if the rape was 30 or 20 years previous or 40 years previous, they're not emotional about it anymore. They don't break down in front of
nice sample size, by the way.
No, I actually talked about it with a friend of mine that's a psychologist.
Were you a senator, and did you have them up in front of you?
Listen to me. She might have been nervous, but my point is this. Any psychologist will tell you, well, not any. The one I spoke to told me, she agreed with me. She said, if it's a matter of being groped, you're not going to be emotional about it 40 years later. It's just, it will be processed by then.
Yeah.
And a person that was maybe literally raped, penis in vagina, violence, threatened with a knife, beaten, that kind of person might still be emotional 30 years later, 35 years later. But I cannot imagine anybody.
And that's a failure of your imagination.
Yeah, no, it isn't. It isn't. A reasonable person will not be emotional 35 years later because a boy tried to take off their swimsuit.
You're not the boss of how people react.
Here's
30
what I
years
am.
later.
Here's what I am, Rick. Okay, people in the audience. Okay, imagine you're in your 50s. It's been 30 years. 30 years ago, you had an unpleasant sexual thing, a groping, someone touched you inappropriately. You were not 6 years old. You were a teenager. Are you going to burst into tears when you're in your... Are you going to get...
She didn't cry. You know who cried was fucking Kavanaugh.
Are you going to get emotional in your 50s when you talk about a boy trying to take your swimsuit off when you were 16? Are you really going to be emotional about that? No, you're not. And if you're not, think about it. Think about it in YouTube land. Now, if you've just been accused of attempted rape, in the most important moment in your life, you were going to be put on the Supreme Court, and somebody comes out of nowhere and says you're an attempted rapist, and for 2 months you are raked over the coals, you're damn right you're going to weep in front of people. I would. I almost wept listening to
So
it.
you're the boss of how people react.
Fuck you and telling me how I am or how I'm not.
Well, you're the one who's saying, imposing the standards on how people
No,
should
no, no,
be.
no. Don't make it personal.
Well,
Don't say you're not the boss of people. Think about it. Don't just accuse me.
Well, I think that the woman,
You use your brain.
Carol, is 53. No, actually, she's 54. And she was chased by through the house by her brother when she was 14. Her brother had a knife. He was probably just fucking around. He probably wasn't going to stab her, but she still remembers that.
Does she weep about it?
No, did the woman weep about it?
She spoke in a barely holding back emotion voice. It was so traumatizing to her. Carol doesn't get emotional when she talks about it, does she, Rick?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been in therapy
you're,
for...
You're proving my point. You're proving my point. Carol can describe what happened unemotionally, can't she?
Maybe sometimes, but sometimes there are frickin' tears.
Okay.
And
okay.
I shouldn't talk about personal information, but
maybe we might need to edit this stuff out.
Well, maybe, or just like it's.
But what I'm saying is, Carol is describing a horrific relationship she had with her brother. Yeah. It's not the same thing.
No.
Most of the teenagers I know have had some kind of unwanted sexual experience. And by the time they're in their 50s, they can discuss it without weeping.
But she didn't weep.
Without getting emotional.
Her voice was a little shaky.
Her voice was a little shaky. She was laying it on thick, Rick.
Maybe, or maybe that's not too far from her regular voice. But there's a chart at Vox.com that shows the questions that she attempted to answer, forthrightly apparently, and the questions that Kavanaugh either answered forthrightly or dodged. And she attempted to answer every question that was asked of her, and Kavanaugh dodged questions 40 plus times.
This is hearsay. I hate it when you do that.
No, but
because your sources are always ludicrously biased. I'm going to say right now, Vox.com probably full of shit. It's probably completely biased.
But if you saw the testimony, there was
I saw the testimony. He was more believable.
In your
She's obviously a radical Democrat that wants to nail this guy, and she's willing to lie to do it.
I just disagree with that entirely. And she brought this up in therapy as early as 2012.
Oh, and by the way, the last thing I read was she hadn't delivered those notes to the Republican committee to read.
Were those her notes to deliver? I thought they were the shrink's notes.
They were given to her lawyers who have refused to, as of 3 days ago, would not release the notes. So I'm throwing that out completely.
There's just so you all can, I'm going to toss this out. Gateway Pundit came out late last night that she talked about the extra door. Have you read about that?
Yeah.
You wanted to comment on that?
What is Gateway Pundit's a super conservative joint?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it is.
But what happened was that there's pictures of
Talk loud because people can't hear.
Yeah, there are pictures of her having that extra door in 2011, and that she got, as a matter of fact, that evidently she got a work permit for that door in 2009.
Wait,
and she says she did, and then in testimony she says she talked about getting the door. She talked about getting the door. In 2012 when she talked about with her psychologist, they didn't even have the door yet.
So wait, you haven't set this up. I don't know what you're talking about.
I think I do. Let me take a guess. That she wanted a second door, a second exit from a room because a single door made her claustrophobic.
Right.
The same way, if you're in the mafia, when you go into a restaurant, you sit with your back to the wall, so you can see the entire room, and so you know where your various exits are, so you don't get Tony Soprano.
Okay, I'm going to give you Adam Carolla. I'm going to bring in Adam Carolla's wisdom. When he was doing Loveline, they used to interpret the callers' voices. And he would always say that when a girl is molested sexually, her voice does not change
Freezes.
from that age. And I believe, if I had to put money on it, that this woman, Ford, was molested in her early childhood, like 6 or 7. So she's definitely pissed off about something. The thing that amazed me was I'd heard her voice, and she sounded like she was about 17. And when I saw the testimony, I thought, oh my God, this is a 52-year-old woman talking with a 17-year-old girl's voice, maybe a 14-year-old girl's voice. So I think that she's definitely had some kind of traumatic sexual experience, and this is fueling her rage and her zeal to get Kavanaugh. So I agree that something happened to this woman because she is not normal.
Occam's razor.
So if in fact she did lie about that extra door, Rick, would that be?
What do you mean lie about the extra door?
She's saying that she didn't get the second door until after 2012, and there's evidence that the door existed, the extra door, in 2011. There are pictures. Would that
I don't understand.
hinder her
Like,
credibility?
I don't know why. She's saying that the trauma only surfaced after therapy in 2012.
Right. Well, that's when she started. The reason they were going to therapy was because of the work that they were doing in the house, and that her husband was angry that they were getting a second door, and that's what triggered the.
I don't know. I'd have to read the whole thing, and I'd have to read it probably. I think Gateway Pundit is a conservative joint, so I'd have to read stuff that maybe spins in a different direction. But if somebody is going around having second doors installed in rooms because they're freaked out otherwise, I don't know how much difference it makes whether it's 2009 or 2011 or 2012.
They're saying that there's actually a business listed. There are 2 psychologists who were having counseling sessions at that address where that door is. So, I mean, that's just something that.
I don't know. I mean, to me, that doesn't sound disqualifying all by itself. I'd have to read more about it.
All right.